Commander Vextai of the Hegemony's 47th Expeditionary Fleet stared at the holographic display with growing unease. The blue-white marble of Earth hung suspended before him, its oceans swirling with deceptive tranquility. Behind him, the bridge. Crew of the dreadnought Sovereign's Talon worked in hushed efficiency, their chitinous forms bent over luminescent consoles. "Sir," called out Navigator Crindall, her voice carrying an unusual tremor. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim. It's from the Endless Pursuit." Vextai's 4 eyes narrowed to slits. The Endless Pursuit had been part of the Third Conquest Wave, dispatched to pacify the human homeworld. 6 cycles ago. They should have returned victorious years past, their holds filled with human slaves and their databanks rich with intelligence on this primitive species technology. "Put it through," he commanded, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. The hologram flickered, replaced by the haggard face of Admiral Colthex. The once proud warrior's exoskeleton was cracked and scarred, his remaining 3 eyes wild with an emotion Vextai had never seen in a hegemony officer. Fear. "Commander Vextai," Colthex's voice crackled through the static. "By the Eternal. Void, turn back. Turn back now and never return to this accursed system. Admiral, your transmission is unclear. Report your status and the outcome of your mission." Colthex laughed, a broken, hysterical sound that sent chills through the bridge crew. "Mission? What mission? We came here as conquerors, Vextai. We brought 300 ships, our finest warriors, our most advanced weapons. We thought we would sweep these humans aside like dust before the storm." The hologram flickered, showing glimpses of space battles, burning ships, and something else. Human vessels, crude and angular, pursuing sleek hegemony craft with relentless determination. "They don't fight like any species we've encountered," Colthex continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They don't surrender when outgunned. They don't retreat when outnumbered. We destroyed their cities and they rebuilt them underground. We orbital bombed their factories and they moved production to asteroids. We eliminated their leaders and 10 more took their place." Vextai felt his confidence wavering. "Surely you exaggerate, Admiral. They're a primitive species, barely past their nuclear age." "Primitive?" Colthex's laugh turned bitter. "They turned our own quantum drives against us. They reverse-engineered our plasma weapons in a matter of months. But that's not the worst part, Vextai. The worst part is that they never let you go." The transmission showed a tactical display, dozens of human ships in pursuit of a single hegemony destroyer, chasing it across light years of space. "That's the Crimson Fang," Colthex explained. "Captain Muldar thought he could escape to the neutral zone. The humans followed him for 2 years, through 17 star systems, past 3 different galactic powers' territories. They never stopped. They never gave up. When they finally cornered him at the Nexus station, do you know what they said?" Vextai remained silent, transfixed by the horror in his superior's voice. They said, "You came to our home, you threatened our children, now you belong to us." They took the crew, alive, Vextai, all of them, and we've never seen them again. The hologram showed more pursuit scenes, human ships, their hulls scarred but determined, following hegemony vessels across the galaxy like vengeful spirits. "Do not engage the humans," Colthex pleaded. "They won't let you escape. Once you draw their attention, once you threaten what they hold dear, they will follow you to the ends of the universe. They will pursue you across dimensions if necessary. Turn back, Commander. Turn back while you still can." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Despite Admiral Colthex's warnings echoing in his mind, Commander Vextai found himself unable to withdraw. The Hegemony High Command had been explicit. Earth was to be subjugated, its population enslaved, its resources claimed for the Empire. A single panicked transmission from a defeated admiral would not be sufficient. Justification to abandon the mission. "Sensors," he barked. "Scan the system. I want to know everything about human defensive capabilities. Sensor operator Nixavara's tentacles danced across her console. Sir, detecting multiple orbital platforms around the third planet. They appear to be watching us. Watching? Yes, sir. Every scanning beam, every probe we deploy, they're tracking all of it. They know we're here. Before Vextai could respond, the communications array chimed with an incoming transmission. The bridge fell silent as a new hologram materialized, a human female with graying hair and steel blue eyes that seemed to pierce through the display directly at him. This is Fleet Admiral Raina Voss of the United Earth Defense Force, the human said, her voice carrying an authority that made Vextai's carapace tingle with unease. You have entered sovereign human space. State your intentions. Vextai straightened, calling upon centuries of hegemony military doctrine. I am Commander Vextai of the hegemony's 47th Expeditionary Fleet. By order of the High Command, you will surrender unconditionally and prepare for occupation. The human's expression didn't change. I see. And if we refuse, then your species will be eliminated and your world claimed by right of conquest. Admiral Voss nodded slowly, as if she had expected this response. Commander, I'm going to share something with you that might change your perspective. Computer, display tactical file Hegemony 7. The hologram shifted, showing a star map with highlighted routes crisscrossing the galaxy. Vextai's breathing apparatus stuttered as he recognized hegemony ship signatures. Dozens of them, all being pursued by human vessels across impossible distances. Your Admiral Colthex was correct about one thing, Voss continued conversationally. We don't let go. Every hegemony ship that has attacked human civilians, every commander who has threatened our children, we remember them all. We have pursuit, fleets dedicated to hunting down each and every one. The display zoomed in on specific engagements. Vextai watched in growing horror as human ships, inferior in every technological aspect, systematically wore down hegemony forces through sheer persistence and adaptability. The Void Reaper, Voss narrated as one battle played out. Destroyed 3 civilian stations in the Kepler system. We've been hunting Captain Zilnith for 4 years now. He's down to his last escort and hiding in a nebula near the Galactic Rim. We'll find him. Another scene. The Death's Herald, responsible for the massacre at New Geneva. Commander Thylock thought he could lose our pursuit ships in the Magellan Void. He was wrong. Our engineers developed new sensor arrays specifically to track him. Through dark matter storms. Vextai's mandibles clicked nervously. These are isolated incidents. Isolated? Voss's laugh was cold. Commander, show tactical file Hegemony 7 Alpha. The display exploded with data. Hundreds of pursuit operations. Human fleets spread across dozens of star systems, all hunting hegemony vessels that had dared to attack human interests. We've learned much from your people, Voss continued. Your quantum drive technology, your plasma weapons, your shield harmonics. But more importantly, we've learned about your psychology. Your species values individual survival above all else. When faced with prolonged pursuit, with the certainty of eventual capture, your warriors break. The hologram showed interrogation. Footage, proud hegemony officers reduced to sobbing husks, begging for mercy. They tell us everything, Voss said matter-of-factly. Fleet positions, supply routes, command structures, technological specifications. Your Admiral Colthex was captured 3 months ago. He's been very cooperative. Vextai's world tilted. Colthex had been captured. Then the transmission was genuine, Voss confirmed, reading his expression. We allowed him to send that warning. We wanted to see what you would do with accurate information about human capabilities. The communications officer beside Voss leaned forward. Admiral, we're detecting weapons charging on the lead vessels. Voss sighed. Commander Vextai, you have one final opportunity to withdraw. Take your fleet and leave human space. Never return, and we will not pursue you. Vextai's pride warred with his growing fear. The hegemony had never retreated from a primitive species, but the evidence before him suggested humans were anything but primitive. "And if I refuse?" he asked. Admiral Voss's smile was predatory. "Then you'll discover why we're called the species that never lets go." Commander Vextai's decision was made. For him, when his weapons officer, young and inexperienced Sub-Commander Peldan, misinterpreted a gesture as an attack order. The Sovereign's Talon's main batteries discharged in a brilliant cascade of plasma fire, streaking across the void toward the human orbital platforms. The effect was immediate and catastrophic, not for the humans, but for any hope of peaceful resolution. Admiral Voss's image flickered as emergency lighting bathed her bridge in red. When the hologram stabilized, her expression had transformed from diplomatic caution to cold fury. "Commander Vextai," she said, her voice carrying a finality that chilled his hemolymph. "You have just fired upon human civilians. You are now designated Target Priority Alpha. There will be no sanctuary for you in this galaxy." The transmission ended, replaced by tactical displays showing human ships emerging from what had appeared to be empty space. Stealth technology far beyond what intelligence had suggested possible. "Sir!" Navigator Krindal's voice cracked with panic. "Reading massive energy signatures throughout the system. They're everywhere." Vextai's tactical display painted a nightmarish picture. Hundreds of human vessels, ranging from sleek destroyers to massive dreadnoughts, materialized from asteroid belts, gas giant atmospheres, and what sensors had registered as space debris. The humans had been watching, waiting, prepared for exactly this scenario. "Full retreat," Vextai commanded. "All ships, emergency jump to waypoint Sigma." The hegemony fleet's quantum drives spun up with desperate haste. 37 vessels, the pride of the 47th Expeditionary Fleet, began their escape from the Sol system. As they entered quantum space, Vextai allowed himself a moment of relief. That relief lasted exactly 43 minutes. "Sir," Communications Officer Drixtel reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. "We're receiving scanner readings from the Night's Edge. They report human vessels in quantum space, matching our trajectory." "Impossible," Vextai snapped. "No. Species can maintain formation in quantum space. The dimensional variance would tear their ships apart, but the evidence mounted quickly. Ship after ship in his fleet reported contact with human pursuit vessels. The humans weren't just following, they were communicating, coordinating, hunting as a pack through dimensions that should have been impossible to navigate in formation. The first casualty came 18 hours into their flight. The destroyer Swift Retribution, bringing up the rear guard, sent a final transmission. "They're not just following us, they're hurting us. They've blocked the exit vectors to..." Static filled. "The channel, Swift Retribution, report," Vextai demanded. The response came not from his ship, but from a human voice, calm and professional. "The crew of the Swift Retribution has been taken into custody. They will be treated according to the Geneva Conventions as prisoners of war. Their vessel has been claimed as compensation for damages to civilian infrastructure." Vextai's blood ran cold. The humans were capturing his ships one by one, not destroying them, taking them, just as Admiral Colthex had warned. Over the following days, the pattern became terrifyingly clear. The human pursuit fleet didn't just match the hegemony vessel's speed, they exceeded it when necessary, fell behind when advantageous, and always maintained pressure. They forced the hegemony ships out of quantum space at predetermined points, herding them like livestock. At each forced exit, Vextai lost more ships. The humans used tactics no civilized species would employ: ramming maneuvers, self-destructive overloads, boarding actions through hull breaches that should have been impossible to survive. They fought with a desperation and creativity that defied military logic. "They're not just soldiers," whispered his science officer Yilnara after analyzing combat footage from the Crimson Spite's final moments. They're individuals, each one, fighting as if the entire war depends on their personal actions. Our warriors fight for the hegemony, for glory, for advancement. They fight for something else entirely. What? Vexatai demanded. Each other, she replied. Every human ship that falls they mourn. Every human life lost they avenge. It's not strategy, Commander. It's passion. By the third week of pursuit, Vextai's fleet had been reduced to 19 vessels. The humans had captured the rest, along with their crews. And with each capture, the human fleet seemed to grow stronger, incorporating hegemony technology into their own ships with impossible speed. The Sovereign's Talon's senior staff gathered in the command chamber, their faces, or equivalent features, drawn with exhaustion and fear. "Sir," Navigator Krindal reported, "we're approaching the neutral zone. Surely they won't follow us into Valdris Consortium space." Vexte wanted to believe it, but Admiral Colthex's warning echoed in his mind. "They will follow you across dimensions if necessary." As if summoned by his thoughts, a new human voice crackled over the communications array. Younger than Admiral Voss, but carrying the same implacable authority. "Commander Vexatai, this is Captain Dmitry Volkov of the UEDF Relentless. You are now entering neutral space, but that will not deter us. You fired upon human civilians. You will answer for that crime, no matter how far you run." The Valdris Consortium's monitoring station at the edge of their territory detected the approaching fleets with characteristic efficiency. High Arbiter Kextul, a crystalline being whose species had maintained strict neutrality for over a millennium, watched the tactical displays with growing concern. "Signal both fleets," Kextul commanded, their harmonic voice resonating through the crystal chambers. "This is Consortium space. All hostilities must cease immediately." The response from the Hegemony fleet was expected. Formal requests for sanctuary, appeals to ancient treaties, offers of tribute in exchange for protection. Commander Vextai's transmissions reeked of desperation. The human response was different. "High Arbiter Kextul," came the measured voice of Captain Volkov. "The United Earth Defense Force respects consortium neutrality. However, the vessels we pursue have committed war crimes against civilian populations. We request permission to continue our lawful pursuit and capture of these criminals." "Negative," Kextul replied firmly. "Consortium space is inviolate. All military actions must cease immediately, or we will intervene to preserve the peace." What happened next would be discussed in Consortium archives for generations to come. The human fleet stopped, completely, dead in space at the precise boundary of Consortium territory. But they didn't withdraw. They simply waited. Days passed. Vextai's fleet sought shelter deeper in Consortium space, but their relief was short-lived. The humans established a perimeter around the entire Consortium territory, not just at the entry point, but at every possible exit vector across dozens of star systems. "How many ships do they have?" whispered Science Officer Yilnara as she analyzed the sensor data. The answer was staggering. The human fleet that had pursued them from Sul had been just the beginning. More ships arrived daily, not just military vessels, but converted civilian craft, mining ships equipped with weapons, transport vessels retrofitted for combat. It was as if the entire human species had mobilized for this single pursuit. "Hi." Arbiter Kextul received a formal communication from Admiral Voss herself on the 7th day of the standoff. "Hi, Arbiter. The United Earth Defense Force wishes to make an arrangement with the Consortium. We will purchase, at fair market value, exclusive access to all trade routes and communication networks leading to your territory. We will also contract your finest engineers to help us establish permanent monitoring stations at every quantum junction point within 50 light years." The implications were clear. The humans weren't just waiting, they were building a cage. Kextul convened an emergency. session of the Consortium Council. They're not making demands, reported trade adjudicator Lixnon. They're offering payment, substantial payment. They want to purchase what they need to maintain their siege. A siege that could last years, pointed out military advisor Zephan. Or decades, added Chief Analyst Mordeal, who had been studying human psychology. According to my research, humans have maintained military campaigns for generations when they believe justice is at stake. They once fought a war that lasted 100 years over dynastic succession rights. The debate raged for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The consortium's neutrality was built on practical considerations, not moral ones. The humans offered prosperity. The hegemony offered only temporary sanctuary for criminals. The announcement came 12 hours later. Attention all vessels. High Arbiter Kextool broadcast on all frequencies. The Valdris Consortium has entered into exclusive trade agreements with the United Earth Defense Force. All previous sanctuary arrangements are hereby nullified. Hegemony vessels have 48 hours to depart Consortium space. Vextai's remaining fleet fled deeper into the galaxy, but the pattern repeated everywhere they sought refuge. The humans didn't conquer or threaten. They negotiated. They bought access. They established supply chains and communication networks. They turned their pursuit into an economic enterprise involving dozens of species across multiple sectors. At the Kethmori Republic, human diplomats offered advanced medical technology in exchange for refueling rights. The Spiral Federation received quantum computing algorithms for allowing monitoring stations. The outer colonies were granted preferred trading status for sharing intelligence. Everywhere Vextai's fleet went, they found human ships waiting, not with weapons drawn, but with contracts signed and local support secured. "Sir," reported Navigator Krindal during their 6th month of flight, "we're down to 7 ships. Food supplies are running low, and the crew is struggling." Vextai knew what she meant. 3 officers had already requested permission to surrender. The constant pressure, the knowledge that every star system in the galaxy was potentially hostile territory, was breaking even his most loyal warriors. "There has to be somewhere," he muttered, studying star charts with increasingly desperate focus. "Some species that won't deal with humans, some territory too remote for them to reach." His answer came from an unexpected source, a quantum burst. Message from Admiral Colthex himself. "Vextai." His former commander's broken voice crackled through the static. "I tried to warn you, but it's not just about pursuit. It's about transformation. They don't just hunt you. They make you part of their system. They make the entire galaxy part of their system." The message continued with intelligence that chilled Vextai to his core. The humans weren't just pursuing hegemony war criminals. They were using those pursuits to establish a galaxy-spanning network of allies, trade partners, and information sources. Each chase became a diplomatic mission. Each capture became a negotiation with local powers. The humans were turning their pursuit of justice into the foundation of an interstellar empire built on consent and mutual benefit rather than conquest and subjugation. And they were using the hegemony's own war criminals as the excuse to build it all. 2 years into their flight, Vextai's remaining 4 ships limped into the outer reaches of the Void Wanderer territories, a region of space dominated by nomadic fleets that recognized no permanent government and traded with no settled species. Here, surely the human's diplomatic web couldn't reach. He was wrong. "Commander," reported his sensor operator, her voice barely above a whisper, "detecting human energy signatures throughout the system. Multiple vessels, all displaying diplomatic flags." The truth became clear within hours. The humans hadn't just pursued them here. They had preceded them, spending months establishing relationships with the notoriously xenophobic Void Wanderers through patient demonstration of mutual benefit. Captain Dmitry Volkov's weathered face appeared on the communication screen, older now after 2 years of relentless pursuit, but no less determined. "Commander Vextai," he said without preamble. "The Void Wanderer fleets have agreed to share sensor data regarding your movements. They've also granted us resupply rights and safe passage through their territories. Your options are becoming limited." Behind Volkov, Vextai could see something that made his remaining hope crumble. Hegemony officers in human uniforms working alongside their former enemies. "Those are my people," Vextai breathed. "Former crew members from ships you've lost along the way," Volkov confirmed. "They've provided valuable intelligence about hegemony tactics and technology. In return, they've been offered full citizenship in human space and the opportunity to help end this conflict peacefully." Science Officer Yilnara stepped forward on the bridge, her posture defeated. "Commander, request permission to speak." Vextai nodded, no longer caring about protocol. "Sir, I've been analyzing the human strategy for the past year. They're not just hunting us, they're building something unprecedented. Every species they contact, every deal they make, every alliance they forge, they're creating a galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than conquest." She gestured to her analysis displays. "Look at the trade routes they've established, the communication networks, the mutual defense agreements. They're using our war crimes as a catalyst to unite dozens of species that have never worked together before." Communications Officer Drixtel spoke up, his voice hollow. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from the remaining crew. They know there's no escape." Vextai looked around his bridge, once the nerve center of a proud warship, now little, more than a floating prison carrying the last remnants of his expeditionary force. His officers were exhausted, demoralized, and increasingly convinced that surrender was their only option. "How?" he asked Volkov. "How did you turn our escape into your expansion?" Volkov's expression softened slightly. "Because we learned something your species never understood, Commander. Fear makes temporary allies. Mutual benefit makes permanent ones. Every species you threatened, every world you attacked, every civilian you killed. They all wanted the same thing we did: justice and security." The display showed a galaxy-wide map with thousands of interconnected nodes, trade routes, communication relays, mutual defense pacts, all centered around the simple principle of protecting each other from aggressors like the hegemony. "We offered them what you never could," Volkov continued. "Partnership instead of subjugation, protection instead of exploitation, hope instead of fear." Over the following days, Vextai watched his remaining ships surrender one by one. The Crimson Dawn was first, her captain citing the futility of continued flight. The Void Stalker followed within hours, her crew requesting asylum. By the end of the week, only the Sovereign's Talon remained, but even his flagship was fracturing. Half the crew had submitted formal requests to surrender. The other half were too exhausted to continue fighting. His senior officers spoke in whispers about the futility of their situation. Navigator Krindal approached him during the night cycle, her courage finally overcoming her loyalty. "Sir, there's something you need to see." She led him to the observation deck, where several off-duty crew members had gathered. They were watching the tactical display, but not with fear, with wonder. "Look at it," whispered Engineering Chief Tolvar. "They've connected species that have been isolated for millennia. The Kethmori are sharing technology with the Spiral Federation. The Void Wanderers are establishing permanent trade relations. The consortium has opened its borders to refugee settlements." Yilnara joined them, her scientific curiosity overcoming her military conditioning. "They're not just creating an empire, Commander. They're creating a civilization, and they're using our crimes to justify it to species that would never have cooperated otherwise." Vextai stared at the display, finally understanding the full scope of what the humans had accomplished. They had turned the hegemony's aggression into a unifying force that spanned the galaxy. Every world threatened by the hegemony had become a potential human ally. Every trade route disrupted by hegemony raiders had become part of a new economic network. Every refugee fleeing hegemony violence had become a citizen of an expanding confederation. The humans hadn't just pursued him, they had used his flight to stitch together a galactic community that could resist any future hegemony expansion. He was no longer just a war criminal on the run. He had become the unwitting architect of his own empire's downfall. In the depths of the Abyss Nebula, where sensor shadows and quantum storms had hidden pirates and fugitives for 1,000 years, Commander Vextai made his final stand. The Sovereign's Talon drifted alone among the cosmic maelstrom, her crew reduced to a skeleton complement of the most loyal or most desperate officers. 3 years of relentless pursuit had taken their toll. The once proud hegemony commander had lost weight his species couldn't afford to lose, his carapace dulled and cracked from stress. His bridge crew moved like ghosts, going through the motions of duty while knowing their cause was hopeless. "Sir," whispered Navigator Crindal, the only senior officer to remain at her post, "we're reading massive quantum disturbances at the nebula's edge. They've found us." Vextai wasn't surprised. The humans had demonstrated an uncanny ability to predict his movements, to anticipate his desperate gambits. How could they not? Half the galaxy was now feeding them information, grateful for the protection and prosperity the human alliance had brought. The communication array activated without being commanded. The humans had learned to override hegemony systems years ago, another gift from the crew members who had surrendered and shared their technical knowledge. Admiral Reyna Voss appeared on the holographic display, her hair now silver, her face marked by the years of campaign. Behind her stood Captain Volkov, and to Vextai's shock, Admiral Colthex himself, not as a prisoner, but wearing the insignia of the United Earth Defense Force. "Commander Vextai," Admiral Voss began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "this has gone on long enough. You are the last. Every other member of your expeditionary force has either surrendered or joined our alliance. You have nowhere left to run." Vexitai's mandibles clicked in bitter laughter. "Joined you? You mean betrayed their own species?" It was Admiral Colthex who responded, his voice steady and clear, not the broken whisper of his warning transmission years ago. "No, Vextai. They chose evolution over extinction. The hegemony's way leads only to endless war and eventual defeat. The human way offers something we never imagined. A place in a community rather than dominion over slaves. The hegemony." "The hegemony is finished," Voss interrupted. "Not conquered, not destroyed, but transformed. Your own high command has entered negotiations with our alliance. They've seen what we've built, what becomes possible when species cooperate instead of compete for dominance." Vextai's remaining crew gathered behind him, their faces reflecting his own disbelief. The mighty hegemony, negotiating. It was unthinkable. 3 years ago, Voss continued, you thought you were escaping justice, but you were actually participating in the greatest diplomatic mission in galactic history. Every world you fled to, every species you sought refuge from, every alliance you forced us to forge, all of it has led to this moment. The hologram expanded, showing a real-time map of the galaxy. Vextai gasped as he saw the extent of the transformation. Trade routes connected former enemies. Communication networks spanned previously isolated regions. Defense pacts protected worlds that had never known security. And at the center of it all, binding it together, was the simple principle that had driven the human pursuit: justice and protection for all. "We never intended to build an empire," Admiral Voss said quietly. "We only wanted to protect our people and ensure that what you did to them could never happen again. But in pursuing that goal, we discovered something remarkable. Most species want the same things we do: safety for their families, prosperity for their worlds, a future free from fear." Captain Volkov stepped forward. "Commander, you've seen our offer extended to every member of your crew who surrendered. Full citizenship, full rights, full participation in the alliance we've built. The same offer stands for you. And if I refuse?" Then you remain here, Voss replied simply. Alone, while the galaxy moves forward without you. Your choice, Commander, but understand this. There is no more hegemony to return to. There are only species working together to build something better. Vexatai looked around his bridge one final time. His remaining officers, barely a dozen out of the thousands who had started this journey, watched him with mixture of hope and resignation. They knew, as he did, that their war was over. Science Officer Yilnara spoke first. Commander, I formally request permission to accept the Alliance terms. One by one, his remaining crew followed suit. Even Navigator Krindal, loyal to the end, finally whispered her request to surrender. Alone on his bridge, surrounded by the ghosts of his former authority, Vexatai faced the truth. He hadn't been defeated by superior firepower or strategic brilliance. He had been undone by something far more powerful. The simple human conviction that everyone, even former enemies, deserved a chance at redemption and a place in the community they were building. The choice was no longer between victory and defeat. It was between isolation and inclusion, between the past and the future. Commander Vexatai, last of the 47th Expeditionary Fleet, slowly removed his command insignia and set them on his captain's chair. 5 years after the last pursuit ship returned to Earth, Ambassador Vextai stood before the Galactic Assembly on the neutral world of Harmony Station. The former hegemony commander wore the simple robes of his new office, his once fearsome carapace now bearing the scars of honest labor rather than warfare. The assembly hall stretched before him, representatives from over 300 species, who had come together not through conquest or coercion, but through the simple recognition that cooperation served everyone's interests better than conflict. Honored delegates, Vexatai began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber through translation matrices that would have been impossible without the technological sharing that defined their new civilization. 5 years ago, I stood on the bridge of a warship, convinced that strength meant the ability to take what you wanted from those weaker than yourself. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many of these beings had been victims of hegemony aggression, their worlds scarred by the very campaigns Vextai had helped to plan. I was wrong, he continued simply. True strength, as the humans taught. Us all lies not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to build. Not in the ability to conquer, but in the courage to cooperate. In the diplomatic gallery, Admiral Voss, now Secretary General of the Galactic Alliance, watched with quiet satisfaction. Beside her sat former Admiral Colthex, now serving as the Alliance's Director of Redemption Programs, helping former military officers from aggressive species find new purposes in their transformed galaxy. The pursuit that began in the Sol system, Vextai said, was never just about justice for the crimes my people committed. It became a demonstration of what was possible when species stood together instead of apart. Every world that offered the humans refuge, every government that shared intelligence, every individual who chose cooperation over conflict, all contributed to what we see today. The holographic displays around the chamber showed the remarkable statistics. Trade volume up 4,000% across previously isolated regions, interspecies conflicts down 89%, technological advancement accelerated through shared research, and perhaps, most remarkably, voluntary participation in the Alliance increasing daily as species discovered the benefits of membership. The humans could have used their pursuit of us to justify conquest, Vextai continued. They could have demanded tribute, established dominion, built an empire in the traditional sense. Instead, they used our crimes to justify something unprecedented, a galactic civilization based on voluntary participation and mutual benefit. He paused, looking directly at the human delegation. They taught us that justice is not revenge, but prevention. That security comes not from fear, but from community. That true victory is not defeating your enemies, but helping them become your allies. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Former hegemony worlds had required years of reconstruction and rehabilitation. Trust had to be built slowly between species with histories of conflict. Economic systems had to be redesigned to serve cooperation rather than competition. But the results spoke for themselves. The galaxy was more prosperous, more secure, and more united than it had ever been in recorded history. "Today," Vextai announced, "I present the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We have documented every crime committed by hegemony forces, identified every victim, and established compensation protocols for all affected parties. More importantly, we have created educational programs to ensure that future generations understand how aggression ultimately serves no one's interests." The chamber erupted in applause, not the polite diplomatic acknowledgement typical of such gatherings, but genuine appreciation from beings who had lived through the transformation from a galaxy of fear to one of hope. As the formal session concluded, Vextai found himself approached by a young human officer, Lieutenant Commander Aria Thorne, whose parents had been killed in the initial hegemony attack on the outer colonies. "Ambassador," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of respect. "My family wanted me to thank you for your work with the Commission. Knowing the truth about what happened, having it officially acknowledged, it helps with the healing." Vextai accepted her hand carefully, still marveling at how these beings could offer friendship to those who had wronged them so deeply. "Lieutenant, Commander, I must ask, do you ever regret your species' decision to pursue justice rather than vengeance?" Thorne smiled, the expression that had once seemed alien to him but now felt as natural as sunlight. "Never. Vengeance would have given us temporary satisfaction but permanent enemies. Justice gave us something better. A galaxy where what happened to my parents can never happen to anyone else's children." Later that evening, in the quiet of his diplomatic quarters, Vextai composed his final report to the Hegemony High Command. Now, the Hegemony Reformation Council, a body dedicated to transitioning their species from military dominance to peaceful participation in galactic affairs. "The great irony," he wrote, "is that the humans accomplished what we never could with all our military might. They united the galaxy not through conquest, but through the simple demonstration that cooperation serves everyone's interests better than conflict. They turned our aggression into their opportunity, our crimes into their diplomatic credentials, our flight into their expansion. But perhaps the greatest lesson is this: they never forgot that we were people, not monsters. Even at our worst, even when we threatened everything they held dear, they saw the possibility of redemption. They pursued us not to destroy us, but to transform us. And in doing so, they transformed themselves and the entire galaxy. We began this as conquerors and ended it as citizens. We started as enemies and became allies. We thought we were escaping justice, but we were actually participating in its ultimate triumph. The humans were right. They never let you escape. But what they won't let you escape from is not punishment. It's the possibility of becoming better than you were. They don't let you escape from hope." As Vextai sealed the transmission, he looked out at the stars visible through his window. Somewhere out there, in the vast network of cooperation and mutual support that now spanned the galaxy, former enemies worked alongside each other, former victims helped their former oppressors find new purposes, and former soldiers had become diplomats, teachers, and healers. The warning Admiral Colthex had given so many years ago had been true. The humans never let you escape. But what they wouldn't let you escape from was not vengeance or punishment. It was the chance to be part of something greater than yourself, something that served all beings rather than just the strong. The galaxy had learned through the strange crucible of a 3-year pursuit across the stars that true strength lay not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to build, not in the ability to conquer, but in the courage to cooperate. And in that lesson, perhaps, lay the seeds of a future where no species would ever again need to warn. Do not engage the humans. They won't let you escape. Because now, no one wanted to. The humans had kept their promise. They had followed their enemies to the ends of the universe if necessary. But instead of bringing destruction, they had brought transformation. Instead of building an empire of fear, they had built a community of hope. In the end, the most terrifying thing about humans wasn't their relentless pursuit of justice. It was their unwavering belief that everyone, even their enemies, deserved the chance to become better than they were. And that belief, more than any weapon or technology, had conquered the galaxy.